Tyrone Bowman Live. Welcome to the program. Let's get right down to it. According to the headline in the Wall Street Journal, Trump initiatives knocked back in a new round of court rulings. Fresh setbacks are latest frustrations for an administration hit with numerous legal challenges to its top policy priorities. So let's talk about this and much more in this particular news article. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump suffered a string of defeats in federal court on Thursday as judges ruled to curtail measures targeting immigration enforcement, voting, and diversity initiatives in education. The decisions are the latest setbacks for the administration, which has been frustrated by judges moving to block or slow the wide reaching actions on core policy goals it has rolled out since taking office in January. One of those cases involved a sweeping executive order signed by Trump in March that created a requirement to provide documentary proof of citizenship, such as passport or a real ID compliant driver's license for the federal mail voter registration system, among other things. A federal judge in Washington, D.C., blocked the Trump administration from implementing parts of the president's push to require proof of citizenship when registering to vote. U.S. District Judge Colleen Cotelli ruled the order went beyond the executive branch's power to control elections and overstepped an area typically controlled by Congress. Most people register to vote via their state. The executive order focused on a federal form some people use to register across the country. Quote, if the president acting alone could dictate the content of the federal form, Congress's careful structured choices would be for naught, end quote, wrote Cotelli, who was nominated to the federal bench by former President Bill Clinton. The order came in a case consolidated from multiple challenges to the executive order, including by the Democratic National Committee and high-profile Democratic lawmakers. In California, a federal judge blocked Trump's efforts to strip federal funding from 16 counties and cities, including San Francisco, as punishment for their immigration sanctuary policies. U.S. District Judge William H. Orrick ruled the White House order likely oversteps the president's authority and the constitutional requirement of due process and protections against coercion. Trump's order called for federal agencies to withhold funding from jurisdictions across the country. That, it said, improperly used taxpayer funds, quote, to albeit so-called sanctuary policies that seek to shield illegal aliens from deportation, end quote. The Justice Department argues federal law overrides the city and state when it comes to immigration. It has filed separate lawsuits against Chicago and New York for policies in those cities that, among other provisions, limit local enforcement cooperation with federal immigration officials and, in some cases, block the housing of immigration detainees in local jails. Immigration and Customs Enforcement can enforce federal immigration law without cooperation from local authorities, but policies at the local level can make that more challenging. The Trump administration has made a crackdown on illegal immigration one of its top priorities. Orrick, an appointee of former President Barack Obama, ruled against a similar push to strip funding from sanctuary cities in 2017 during Trump's first term. Trump's crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs also suffered setbacks in two federal courts on Thursday. Judges from New York, Hampshire, and Maryland ruled that Trump's effort to deny federal funding to public school districts with DEI programs likely violates the First Amendment's protections against coerced speech. The Trump administration had sent a letter to states and school districts requiring them to certify that they were not engaging in, quote, illegal DEI practices, end quote, such as teaching students that the nation is built upon systemic and cultural and structural racism. Well, that's insidious. Of course, America is built on systemic and structural racism. That's the first original sin of America. whether folk want to hear, many times when people hear the truth, they get angry and get upset. Let me tell you the difference between the Republicans or MAGA, whatever they want to call themselves, and Democrats. See, they're more forceful, they're more arrogant, they're more prideful, they're more bodacious with their arguments. Democrats, you're too passive. Stop sitting back, allowing your enemy just to say and do whatever they want to do. You have power, you have a voice, you have an office. Stand up and fight for those who cannot stand up and fight for themselves. The country's largest teachers union sued to block the administration from denying federal funds to school districts that failed to comply with the anti-DEI policy. The Trump administration, which imposed a certification deadline of April 24, said it was trying to prevent federal tax dollars from sponsoring racial discrimination against students. Against what students? See, that's very vague. That's very vague and inconspicuous in its language. What students are you referring to? White students. Those are the students. White people have never been discriminated here in America. There's no anti-whiteness in America. There's anti-blackness and anti-everything else in America. But there's no anti-whiteness here. So let me read that again. The Trump administration, which imposed a certification deadline of April 24, said it was trying to prevent federal tax dollars from sponsoring racial discrimination against students. But critics said the White House's definition of what constituted unlawful DEI was too vague. That's just what I said. And risked chilling discussion on racial issues inside the classroom. So they can teach anything in these Republican school-led districts they want. But you can't teach real history. You can't teach anything that makes them feel bad, makes their ancestors not be more less than godly. Well, they were what they were. And let me just say this about the trade slave, because I'm not going to let black folk off the hook. The first traders of slavery were the kings of Africa, who willingly and surreptitiously entered in contractual agreements with the first white people who came to Africa to sell their own people into slavery. That is a stipulated fact. Whether they like it or not, whether they want to deal with it or not, African kings were duplicitous in slavery as well. You need to read the book From Babylonian to Timbuktu. These are hardcore facts. Now, is it right what happened over in the Americas once they got them over here? No, because all kings had slaves. You do realize that. Read your Bible. There's so much stuff that's coded in secrecy in the scriptures. King Solomon had slaves. King David had slaves. Abraham had slaves. All the kings ruled with total authority. And that's something you're not going to hear, but it's true. U.S. District Judge Stephanie Gallagher of Maryland, appointed by Trump during his first term, said the administration didn't have the authority to regulate circular by declaring, quote, broad categories of classroom speech discriminatory, end quote. U.S. District Judge Lanya McCafferty, an Obama appointee, came to a similar conclusion, quote, plaintiffs are likely to be successful in arguing that defendants are attempting to coerce third parties to punish or suppress disfavored speech on their behalf, quote, end quote, McCarthy wrote in her decision. Public schools typically get about 10% of their funding from Washington. Despite the potential consequences, more than a dozen mostly blue states declined to sign the certification. Gallagher delayed the Education Department's anti-DEI funding restriction for now, McCafferty's injunction was narrower. It barred the administration from enforcing a policy against the National Education Association and its members, and, quote, any entity that employs, contracts with, or works with, quote, end quote, the union. Courts previously have also ruled against Trump's targeting of DEI initiatives in federal contracting. White House spokesman Harris Fields was dismissive of the adverse rulings in a series of comments Thursday afternoon, saying, quote, we're confident in securing an ultimate victory in the courtroom, close quote. Take your children out of those schools and put them in the schools that's going to help them and teach them. Teach your children yourself. The libraries are filled with all types of historical facts. Bookstores carry all types of pertinent information, and you can teach your children. And in closing, regarding the DEI ruling, Fields said, quote, any judge objecting to this effort is making a mockery of the Constitution they swore an oath to uphold, close quote. The heck, what does that mean? Thank you for watching. Tyrone Bowman, never surrender, never quit.